All right, Lagos, you're still listening to Hard Facts on 99.3 Nigeria Info. I am Sandra Ezekwesili.
And I'm Aghogho Oboh.
And you've just heard the 5 p.m. news. That means that we're diving deep into one big issue in Nigeria today. Today, we're looking at the moves by the federal and state governments to borrow 2 trillion naira from our pension funds for infrastructure projects. Now, here's today's big hard fact. The Pension Reform Act of 2004 permits government to borrow up to 20% of the pension fund to address national issues.
I can't borrow my own from there.
And since the pension fund currently stands at 10 trillion naira, government has the right to borrow a maximum of 2 trillion naira, which is what they are now doing. They're maxing out. The government has said the loan is to fund the construction of roads, railways, and other transport infrastructure, as well as power plants. Now, this plan has sparked quite a bit of debate. Some observers are saying it is perfectly normal, a perfectly normal way to fund infrastructure. Others are concerned about the safety of the pension money. And one thing that we like to do on Hard Facts is provide you with insights when these types of conversations are happening. No speculation, no sensationalism, just the hard facts. So for the rest of the hour, we'll talk about how pension funds work, the normal ways in which they put money into infrastructure, the merits, the demerits, and then we're going to let you decide if the government's plan passes all those tests. Joining us to make sense of all of this is an economic expert. He is the chief economist of Business Day, and his name is Nonso Obikili. How are you? Good to have you on the show, Nonso.
Good, happy to be here.
Okay, you're going to have to say that again.
Okay, good, happy to be here.
Fantastic. All right, great. Nonso is usually on the phone with us, so it's great to have him live in the studio. Aghogho, yes?
Absolutely.
What's making that sound? I'm trying to figure it out. Oh, yeah, that's you.
Not just a culprit there.
Now, throughout the conversation, we want to ask the big questions. How comfortable are you with government borrowing from your pension fund? How happy are you with the balance and the growth rate in your pension fund account? I'm particularly happy about the growth rate of my pension fund account. Aghogho, are you?
I'm not happy. I don't have access to it yet. I want my money.
But the conversation you were having during a community report was quite huge.
Intense. I can't remember any other time we had such intense conversations. And it's something that the state government will have to really sit back and say, did we really speak with these people?
Before
okay,
we
maybe the
did
closest
this.
was the land use chap. This is very close to it, you know.
No, so what do you think about this plan to ban Okada and Keke?
I think it seems kind of counterproductive. I think in general, Okadas are not a very efficient way to move people around a big city like Lagos.
Okay.
That's just the reality, right? For public transportation, Okadas are not a solution.
Okay.
But I think the practical reality of Lagos today is that Okadas are very necessary. Not just for moving people, for moving stuff around. Imagine all the logistics businesses that essentially run on Okadas for the last mile delivery, because that's the easiest way to get around all the traffic issues. That's the real. So what are people going to do? You know, how will people get around? How will people deliver stuff? How will people move from A to B without Okadas and without kicking up peps? So that's the challenge. So I don't think Okadas are a very efficient way to run a public transport system. That's clear. But I think this ban seems kind of counterproductive because there's currently no real alternative.
Now let's talk about pensions. In other countries, we see pension funds investing in infrastructure, right? But if it's either direct investment or through an infrastructure investment board, why is the government instead borrowing the money here for the same infrastructure instead of letting the pension funds invest directly?
Right. So I think there are two things, but I'll talk about the infrastructure problem first.
Okay.
We have serious infrastructure challenges, and that's because the way most of our infrastructure is structured, it does not raise money. Toll roads don't exist, so roads don't raise money. Airports are kind of run by fan, so they raise some money, but they're not raising money profitably.
Say that again. Roads don't make money.
Yeah.
So when people argue that if you put the infrastructure in place, it will bring money, for example, moving goods from one point to the other, are they right in the analysis?
It brings money to the road users because they'll move stuff easily. They might save on mechanic costs because roads won't be damaged. But in terms of an investment, it needs to have a money, a financial pipeline flowing from that infrastructure project. If it doesn't exist, then there's no reason for the investor to put money there.
Oh.
So a lot of projects don't make money. And that's a structural problem. It's a problem with the exclusive list that gives the federal government the right to most infrastructure. And the federal government does not want to let that go. Same thing with the ports, same thing with the airports, same thing with rail, same thing with roads. So if they don't make money, then you can't make a decision as a private individual, whether as an individual or a fund, to invest. Because you cannot see the return of investment. That's what investment is. You put money down to do something, the income from that project eventually gets paid back over time with interest, and it makes the investment worthwhile. So that's the key problem. Our infrastructure does not make financial sense because of the way it's structured.
If you put a toll on the road, it makes money, right?
Yes.
Oh.
So it's as simple as that. So if you think of, well, I don't want to use the Ikoyi Bridge, but that was the idea behind the Ikoyi Bridge. Okay, concession this out to a company to put their money down, and the income stream is the tolls. So you calculate it, how many cars pass every day, that raises X amount of money. That means if I put X amount down, after 15 years, it can make a return, and that makes the investment worthwhile, right? So that's how infrastructure investment works for the private sector. So you can't just say, oh, well, the road is good for Nigeria, so we invest. Pension funds or banks or private investors can't go to the money and say, I built that road, give me money. They can't do that, right? And so if you want people to invest in infrastructure, you have to structure it such that there's a revenue pipeline and it now makes sense to invest. And we haven't done any of that hard work yet.
Well, you said that there were two things. So you talked about the infrastructure first.
Now, the pension side is complicated. And on that, I have 4 things. Well, first thing is that we need to realize that pension funds are people's money, right? You worked hard.
It's my money.
You worked hard, supposedly. You got paid a salary.
I work hard.
Supposedly.
This is hard work.
You got paid. You took some of that income and put it in a pension fund. It's your savings.
Right.
So the money belongs to you, right? So anybody who wants that money has to come to you and say, hey, please, give me 20%, give me 2 trillion, let me do this project. You have to appeal to the owner of the money. You can't just say because you're the government and it's in the law somewhere, which I haven't read actually, to be fair, you have the right to just take it. That's not how democracy works, right? You have to appeal to the owner of the funds and say, make the case for it.
How does this appeal work?
I don't know. I don't have the answers there. But it certainly doesn't work by announcing on TV that we're taking 2 trillion from your pensions. It doesn't work that way. Right, so that's the first thing. The second thing is, pension funds don't have cash sitting down in the bank, right? Pension funds invest in stuff. They invest in bonds, in securities, stock markets, some infrastructure, even some private companies. So the idea that they have $10 trillion in cash that you can just go and take is not true. If the pension funds are to raise 2 trillion now, it means they will have to sell 2 trillion naira worth of investments to give to the government. Who's going to buy 2 trillion worth of investment in Nigeria today? There's not that many buyers, right? Foreign investors are still very shaky about Nigeria. Banks are limited. So for the pension funds to raise 2 trillion in cash, they have to sell 2 trillion naira worth of assets to somebody. And there is no somebody, right? So it's not like they're sitting down with cash in a hole somewhere, just saving it. They've invested it, most of it. And if you want to raise 2 trillion from them, they have to now sell those investments. And who are they going to sell it to? That's the second thing. Third thing is, if you look at what pension funds have actually invested in, right? As at now, about 80% of all pension funds are invested in federal government bonds or securities, which essentially means 80% of all pension funds have been given to the government to spend. They've been loaned to the government for interest, right? So it's not the pension fund's fault that the government did not use that money for infrastructure, right? It's wholly on the government. So it's like if I borrow you, if I loan you money, and then I now say, well, I want to collect the money back and loan it again, or something like that. It just doesn't make any sense, right? Because pension funds already invest in government bonds. 80% of all pension funds are held in government securities. And so who is going to buy those 2 trillion worth of securities that will now give the government money to build this infrastructure? And the final thing, I promise. According to the federal government's own statistics, we need about $30 billion every year.
That's right.
Right? For about 20 years or so to begin to make a road, 40 years, to make a road on our infrastructure problem. If you take 2 trillion out today, maybe they give you, maybe it happens, whatever. What happens next year?
We
Are you
double
gonna,
the
are you
number.
gonna come again?
For another 4 trillion.
What happens the year after that?
7 trillion.
Right? So just thinking strategically about how to fix Nigeria's infrastructure problems,
Hmm.
just thinking you can take 2 trillion naira and fix it is not a solution.
So if you're the
Right.
eternal optimist, I realize there are 8 million contributors right now to the pension. So things get better. The numbers double next year. They take from those ones who have added to the pool. Are you laughing? Wait, because I'm thinking 8 million is what percentage of the entire country is that, or even working population? It's still a small fraction.
So if you read the Pension Act, when they're listing the investment guidelines, the number one thing is safety of pension funds.
That's right.
Number one. Before I
That's
talk about returns, because safety first. Because people are going to retire whether Nigeria works or not,
Mm-hmm.
right? And the worst case scenario is for people to retire with no money. It's better if they can retire with money and the country works, but it's better if they can still retire even if the country is not working.
Let's play the eternal
Right.
optimist.
So
here. What if
let me just add
Go
one
ahead.
thing. Now, if you read the news every 4 years, every 4 years, you hear the same story. Government spends X billion, X trillion on XYZ, and we see nothing for it, right? What's the guarantee that if they take 2 trillion naira now and spend it on XYZ, that will somehow magically boost the economy, given all the other problems in the economy, right? So the question is, are you willing to risk people's futures to maybe try to tackle this problem that the money can't even tackle? Right? So, I mean, during, are we allowed to name names? I don't know. I don't want to.
Yes.
During Obasanjo's time, we had this whole thing where we spent 16 billion or so on electricity,
Oh, right.
and then still no power. NEPA still the same, right?
Hmm.
In the last 5 years, we've raised the national debt by,
Right.
we've almost doubled it.
Hmm.
Right.
We're still not a rich country. We're still, economy is still not booming. You know, we're still basically growing at 2%,
Hmm.
right? So what's the guarantee that if you raise pension funds now for these your infrastructure projects, that will lead to the growth that supposedly brings more?
If
into the
we
system.
play the eternal optimist, maybe also bring you to the eternal optimist side, saying that money happens eventually. How quickly do we get our money back? Because it's our money actually.
It is actually.
Well, so the thing is, for pension funds, the goal is to make sure that the fund is at least growing faster than inflation, right? That's the bottom line. Because if it's not, then any money you put into pensions you're actually losing money. So that's the goal. Now we don't know what terms the government wants to borrow at. We're hearing 6% or so, which is way lower than inflation, right? Which means even if they do pay back, you're going to lose money on that. Even if they do pay back.
And there's no fear, because I suddenly realized that the more than 80% of the people who were in the pension fund, they're in our age range actually, 30 to 30. Okay, I mean
We're
they're out
the
of
ones who
that,
are going to retire in 30 years,
Mm-hmm.
some of us 5 years.
some of us
And
maybe
then
10 years.
want to look at our pension and say, can we live off this?
Hmm.
And if the answer is no, then the pension system has been a waste for us.
Because
Wow.
see,
And the thing is, we have only a very few fraction of people who actually contribute to pensions.
Hmm.
And the PenCom is now trying to get people from the informal sector to contribute.
That's right.
But if they are watching and saying, people have contributed,
They want to take their
they
money.
want to take their money, that money may not come back. It may come back, but it will be less. So
Mm.
why will I contribute?
For the person who's listening to the show, she's thinking about this pension money that government is about to borrow, and the biggest question on her mind is probably, what guarantee do I have that by the time I retire, the government would have paid the money back or adequately serviced the debt? Especially because right now, government's debt to revenue ratio is already very alarming. So, how do I get this woman who's listening to me to calm down, Nonso?
Well, she probably shouldn't be calm. It's an issue to be alarmed about. And to be fair, look, pension funds have the right to loan money to the government, right? And as I said earlier on, 80% of all pension funds have been loaned to the government, but it's structured through official government bonds, official securities that must be redeemed, right? So that's the proper way to give government money. Now, this shortcut that they want to do, it seems like, it rubs me the wrong way, right? Because you have a path to borrow officially from
Mhm.
pension funds in a
Mhm.
structured way.
Mhm.
And even if you want to borrow for infrastructure directly, you
Mhm.
can create things like infrastructure funds that pension funds can then invest in. But you
Huh.
have to make the case that this is an investable, this is a good investment for them,
Hmm.
right? Because for them, the minimum is to not lose money, to
Hmm.
secure pension funds before anything else. So you can structure infrastructure projects that make sense for pension funds to invest.
Mhm.
Because pension funds invest in all sorts of things. They invest in companies, they invest in states, bonds, even in some real estate.
But in
So
Nigeria, they're restricted to treasury bill. We saw the government restrict. Well, they don't restrict the treasury bill, but recently we saw the government restrict the pension funds access to treasury bills, which was one of the major ways that they were lending to government. So how do
small difference
oh,
to CBN bills,
oh
which is different from the federal government securities.
oh
Right?
what's the
Yeah.
difference?
Yeah, everybody has. So in one instance, you're loaning to the CBN. In the other,
Okay,
you're loaning to the government.
I
Right.
see.
The CBN is supposed to only be for banks, and it's only supposed to be for banks, and it's supposed to be in an emergency situation to
Okay.
remove liquidity from the system.
Okay.
But over time, while trying to deal with FX crisis and all that, they sold it to everybody,
Hmm.
right? And so they're trying to go back, but it has created lots of problems.
Hmm.
But anyway, let's not. The pension funds are not restricted from loaning, from buying securities or
Mhm.
buying bonds from the federal government.
Okay.
They have freedom to buy as
To
much as they
buy.
like.
Oh,
right?
I see.
There's no restriction
Okay.
there.
Okay. All right. Let's come to you who's listening at home because our phone lines have been blinking since you've been talking about this. How comfortable are you with the government borrowing from your pension fund? 012770993, 012771993, 012772993, and 012773993. How happy are you with the balance and the growth in your pension fund account? We have an economic expert on the show. He's the chief economist of Business Day in Oso Bikili. I'm Sandra Ezekwesili.
And I'm Aghogho Oboh.
Hello, good evening.
Sandy Beke, good evening.
Good evening to you.
You
What's
know
your
where
name?
that man has come
I'm
from,
fine. Happy New Year.
Happy New Year.
Long time.
Yes, what's your name, sir?
I'm Ike. I'm calling from, I live in Ikoyi, I'm calling from Yaba right now.
All right, welcome, Ike. I guess I should call him Ike Moment. Ike, go ahead.
Okay. There's no problem borrowing from us. You just let them use it for the normal thing they're supposed to do with it. Okay, that's just the problem. You know, this country, at times, I don't really understand what's going on.
Hmm.
They will say something there, they will do something. At times, they will start doing another thing. You know,
Hmm.
that's just the problem we are facing here.
Hmm. Okay. Ike, thanks for calling me. Hello. Hello. Yes, welcome. What's your name?
Yes, my name is Kari.
Go ahead, Tari.
Yes, good afternoon, Sandra. Good afternoon, Aghogho.
Yeah, Tari, go ahead.
And good afternoon, the economist there.
Good afternoon.
Federal government wants to borrow from our pension. These guys, sometimes they are scam. The ones they've been borrowing, what have we done with them now? Remember, the one they borrow, like if I listen very well when I heard him said, I don't know what he said, they borrowed more than 2 times what we were owing before. What have we done with all this money? Check around. What have we done with all? Look at our roads. What have we done with all this money? I want to borrow my pension now. How are we supposed to pay back? How are we supposed to pay back?
Big question. Is there a way that the pension funds, PENCOM, for instance, can ensure that the government pays back? Is there, I mean, the first thing is safety of the pensions, right? So what mechanisms exist to make sure that government pays back, or to make sure that whether or not government pays back, are they all right?
Well, the mechanism is to go through the securities route, right?
Okay.
If the government sells securities, which is borrowing, it's structured. You sell to multiple partners, to pension funds, to banks, to international investors. So everybody has that confidence that this is a actual guarantee that you must pay back no matter what, right? So it's not as if the government does not have any path to borrow. It does. You can sell bonds all you like. I mean, not a max, not all you like, but you're free to sell bonds, right? And bonds have a guarantee that they will be paid back by whichever government is in power, whatever the reason, whatever happens, the federal government guarantees that it must pay back these bonds, right? So the question the real question is not that they want to borrow; it's that they want to borrow at cheaper than what the market is offering, right? And they want to be able to do that without going through the difficult route of selling new bonds or selling new securities. Right.
Is government running out of institutional lenders? Is that the reason why it's turning to the pension fund?
I don't know. I think, like you mentioned earlier on, debt servicing to revenue ratio is very high. I think it's about 60% in 2019, which is very, very high. Many bilateral lenders are uncomfortable with some policies that we have, and so it's difficult to raise money from that angle. If you go to the IMF example, the World Bank, they attach some things that they will expect to see, some kind of policies that they would expect to see before they can give you those funds, and maybe they're not too comfortable with that. So the bottom line is that the federal government's financial position is squeezed, right? And so it's looking for other alternatives, and it's seeing that maybe pension funds can be one alternative, even though it's complicated. But
Do the pension managers have a right to reject a rate that is too low? Because you mentioned 6%. Who set that interest rate for this loan that government is taking from the pension fund? And do the managers have a right to reject it if it's too low?
ordinarily they should, because, like I said, you shouldn't, according to the pension law, you can't force pension funds to invest in anything, right? If you can borrow, but it has to be a mutual agreement, right? It's because it's not government money; it's private money, and so you can make an offer. If people want to invest, then they invest. If they don't want to, then they don't. It's like selling government bonds. You don't have to force anybody to buy government bonds, right? You sell it, you provide a price. If people want to buy, they buy. If people don't want to buy, you move on, right? So we haven't had enough information about this particular instance. So I'm not quite sure exactly how they plan to do, whether they plan to appropriate by force or to try to work with pension funds to settle on a rate or something. There's not enough information to say which way they want to go.
Interestingly, we were going to have somebody from the government, but last minute they were pulled into a different meeting, so they couldn't answer all these questions that we have. But let's come back to the phone lines. Hello, good evening.
Hello, good evening, Sandra.
Good evening to you. What's your name? Welcome, Mr. Vincent. Go ahead.
You know what? When I hear most of the officials talking about this borrowing, left, right, center, I begin to laugh. One, the heavy impunity everywhere doesn't give us the great understanding that these things will be managed well and there will be payback. One. Then the capital is this. The major cash cow to the government, that is the oil and gas sector, has been untapped. And these guys are sitting down on that gold mine that in the next 2 decades, it will be out of fashion. And they all just want to slow all of us down, continue to borrow that the next 3 generations cannot pay. Okay, believe in me, when Mr. President was campaigning, he said there was nothing like subsidy. That one is an apology. Then, if you go down to if you do that oil and gas, if you can bring in these guys if there is any level of sincerity here, bring in these guys that say they are operating illegal refinery. As Oshibajo went down there when they were having scuffles and told them, make them into cooperatives. Give them loan from the back of industry. Let them start refining for us, and with DPR, we start monitoring them. So, Sandra, you see all this thing, what we have here is these guys are using mega semantics and rhetoric to if you can see every two days or at best 1 week, they bring up one chapter, one major chapter, all of us will just go into that. Before you know it now, 3.5 years will just go by. And we continue to age. I look at my children, I see who are the people who have been trusted managing this. If I have a business, will I just look at somebody? I give you a timeline of 6 months, 12 months, 18 months. I have not seen any tangible something, policy formulations and standards they are setting. I will just do away with the person and move on. So the thing is this: all of us, you can see, in most countries now, before you know it, if the managers of this managing economy refuse to sell or do quasi privatization in the refinery, when this man Dangote will come on board, whenever, These those 3 or 4 refineries will be sold as scrap.
All right, Vincent. Thanks for calling. What are your thoughts on the points that Vincent has made?
So he makes some good points. Government currently wastes a lot of money. If you think about the key one, which is fuel subsidy, we spend about 1 trillion naira estimate a year subsidizing fuel, which most people would now agree is a waste. Right? So on the one hand, you're trying to borrow 2 trillion from pension funds. On the other hand, you're blowing 1 trillion naira every year on fuel subsidies. It kind of doesn't add up, right? And we have other subsidies. We have FX subsidies that are still there. We have electricity subsidies that are still there. And so there's lots of other options for government to raise money besides wanting to raid pension funds. And I think that's his point.
Raid.
Yeah. I mean,
It's just a
said
choice of
over and over
words.
again, raid, huh?
Raid.
if it eventually turns out that the government unilaterally appropriates money from pension funds at 6% without any kind of
I beg.
a beg,
Mm.
then it's essentially a raid, right? Yeah, there's no other word to use. It's a raid on pension funds.
Mm. Okay. All right, let's take a quick break. We'll come back and continue this conversation. Keep calling us on 012770993. Leave us messages on Facebook, Nigeria Info 99.3. You're listening to Hard Facts. I'm Sandra Ezekwesili.
And I'm Aghogho Oboh.
Hard Facts will be right back. Welcome back to Hard Facts.
Lagos, you're still listening to Hard Facts on 99.3 Nigeria Info. We're talking about the federal and state government's plan to borrow 2 trillion naira from our pension funds for infrastructure projects. Now, we told you when we started that the Pension Reform Act of 2004 permits government to borrow up to 20% of the pension fund to address national issues. And since the pension fund currently stands at 10 trillion naira, government has the right to borrow a maximum of 2 trillion naira, which is what they're now doing. They're maxing out. And helping us make sense of this is an economic expert, the chief economist at Business Day, Nonso Obikili. And we have you having this conversation with us as well. We're asking if you are comfortable. How comfortable are you with government borrowing from your pension fund? Now, for my pension fund to feed me, Nonso, in retirement, it has to be growing today, right? At a rate that is higher than the inflation rate and the depreciation rate of the naira. Do you believe that the federal and state government would be able to pay an interest rate higher than that?
I don't think so. But again, it really depends on what inflation is, and that's a monetary policy problem, right? The lower inflation is, the more everything kind of makes sense. If inflation gets as low as 7-8%, then you can kind of see people borrowing at 10% making sense, 9% making sense in the long term. But inflation looks like it's heading towards about 12% now, right? And historically, it's been around 12-13%, sometimes 11, rarely less than 10 for a long period of time, right? Which means anything below 10% a year is a loss. Then you also have to add the devaluation problem, right? Over the last 60 years or so, then the naira has devalued by on average about 15% a year, on average, which means that if your pension fund is not making about 15% a year on average, then you're better off just buying dollars and putting it in a box, right? And so those are the underlying macro conditions that your pension fund needs to beat to be able to be actually safeguarding your future, to put it that way.
So something that's been a nagging concern, I'm sure you did sense that from the listeners, this trust deficit problem. I mean, just like a couple of years ago when Olusegun Obasanjo was the president and he was making all those trips to see how he could cancel those debts. And I remember very well back in the 80s then, the argument was we don't have a debt problem. Until it came to bite us, and then we suddenly realized that the revenue we had profits we had made, we had to spend about $18 billion, settling the Paris Club and the rest of them. So when Nasser El-Rufai stepped out of that NEC meeting and he said that, most of we guys will be, we're 30s now, and, still some time to go before we'll make those withdrawals from our our pension. You think that in any way that argument back when the Minister of Finance, Zainab Ahmed, says we don't have a debt problem, but I'm thinking if you take 2 trillion naira, it's also added to Nigeria's debt profile, right? Which is a 26 trillion naira billion. Is it? Trillion. Where am I?
I need to check. Yeah.
Wait, let's be sure about this.
It's not a billion because billion is too small.
It should be dollars, right?
Yeah.
Okay, $26 billion, right? So
Yeah.
if we put this one together with that, it also increases our debt profile. Will they pay this one faster than the others in the layman's?
So, without meaning to sound like a pessimist, nobody in government now is going to be there in 10 years, right? Buhari has one more term, hopefully. Many of the governors are in their second term. In the next 10 years, you probably have a completely different political landscape in Nigeria. So the actors now aren't going to be there in 10 years to deal with whatever debt issue there is, right? And that's a systematic problem with Nigeria.
But isn't debt continuous?
Yeah, whoever is there now will have to pay it, of course. But it'll be somebody else's problem, right? In terms of who's actually there standing behind the mic and explaining what we have to do, right? So you always have the case where executives in democracies don't tend to worry as much about long-term issues as they should because they're not going to be there to deal with it. It's going to be somebody else's problem, right? So Nigeria already has a debt problem. That's pretty clear. If you look at the if you get in a situation where you spend 65% of your income on servicing debt, that is a debt problem.
So I just want 26 trillion naira.
Okay.
It's a debt.
Yeah,
So,
yeah.
Go ahead, please.
If you get in a situation where you spend 65% of your income servicing debt, you're in a debt problem. It doesn't matter whether you feel you can have more revenue by doing XYZ or you should be richer or whatever. It's based on the facts on the ground now, right? And we take it for granted that we can just snap our fingers and raise revenue in Nigeria. But historically, there has never been anybody in this space we call Nigeria who has effectively been able to collect taxes from people, from everybody. People have small niches, people have small places where they corner, but there has never been an entity that effectively collected a lot of taxes from people all over Nigeria. So it's a big challenge. It's not something that we can snap our fingers and hope that it will work and start to borrow based on that assumption, right? It's very hard work, very, very, very hard work. And
good luck to that man.
You can't make that kind of bet with pension funds.
But listen, 20 years, they should have paid that money back.
Maybe not.
Okay, let's come back to the phone lines. Hello. Thanks for calling.
Hello.
Good afternoon. What's your name?
My name is Ahmed.
All right, go ahead.
Yeah, a quick one. Now, obviously, the case of Nigeria is typically between a hard rock and something. You know how to say it. Because, like, you look at America. America is about the highest borrower of funds. You look at it critically. And they're still running. So the problem is not the fact that we borrow. I think the problem, like you rightly pointed out, is the fact that we don't know how to utilize what we borrow. And if you look at it critically again, you notice that it's not much what we're lending to use the funds for. It's the kind of people who manage the funds. They just whack it, and you never see what's supposed to be used for. So then we have to go back again, successive government after government. Be you the one who's out there to swallow everything? You see, it's just a vicious cycle. So I think our biggest problem is us. We are the government. We need to change our orientation. Even if you have the right people in there, the few we trust in can only do so much. Yeah.
Oh, that's quite unfortunate. Hello, good evening.
Hello, good evening, Sandra.
Good evening to you.
Thank you very much. I am Ezekwesili from Syria.
Is it Doom? Welcome.
Thank you very much. Sandra, I want to say that it is time we put embargo on borrowing in Nigeria. When you use over 25% of your budget to service your debt, I can't come to Nigeria, but we don't have money. Our problem is that whenever a governor comes or a president comes, they will think that they will solve the infrastructural need of the country in their term. They will go about showing the state or the nation into debt. Sandra, I want to ask, Obasanjo in 2007 left Nigeria on zero debt. From 2007 till now, from Yar'Adua, Jonathan, and Buhari administration, can we ask ourselves, those money we borrowed, what is the performance of those loans? Sandra, before I go, because I know that there's no time, let me put it on notice that this administration, they throw their state and their country into debt instead of using their IGR to do what I call routine development. When you start a project, when you go, you hand over the project to your successor. The successor will use the IGR to fund that project until it finishes. But whenever they come on board, they go ahead throwing the nation into darkness, into debt. Not only that, the performance of those loans they borrowed, the successive administration will not ask questions on how they implemented the money they borrowed. See, Sandra, before I go, let me say this. If I, Ezedum, becomes Nigerian president, I, Ezedum, I am going to institute a probe that will probe Nigerian debt from 1999. Sandra, any Nigerian president who borrowed money and the project did not perform, Sandra, I, Ezedum, I will arrest the president, I will arrest the ministers in that sector, if the president is there, I will go and seize the tomb. I will seize all the assets in that family, and until I recover the money.
But that would be dictatorship, wouldn't it?
I will be brutal in recovery of loans.
Okay.
Sandra,
Yeah.
we have oil, we have custom, and FIRS, they generate billions of dollars on yearly basis. Which project are we executing in Nigeria that we cannot use our money to fund our infrastructure? What our leaders do is to go and get cheap money and throw themselves in financial profligacy. Let me tell everybody that anytime I become president, if we are father borrowed money for Nigeria and we seize the money, I will seize all the assets of that family. I will not. This is my personality. And until we do this, until we put bite in our governance, financial profligacy of government officials will continue. Thank you very much, Sandra. I made the
Ezedum, thanks for calling.
So help me God.
Okay. Ezedum sounds like a dictator over there.
It's acceptance speech, huh?
Hello, good evening.
Hello, good evening, Sandra.
Good evening.
My name is Aghogho. I'm actually along the airport road.
Adekunle, how comfortable are you with government borrowing from your pension fund?
That is nonsense.
It's nothing.
Okay. Let me say something here. This government, both the current and the past government, they have been known for owing pensioners. My father retired. When he retired, he was paid let me say half of the money that's supposed to be paid at the retirement fund. Today, he died. The money cannot be paid. I'm even tired of, after writing series of application and everything, I'm tired. I've just let go. But the funny part of this thing, I just pity those pension managers. Because private companies are involved in this matter. Some of them will retire from where they're working. At the end of the day, they will go to you, tell them story that there's some money because you borrow one government that is not responsible money. This money, to me, if there's money on ground, I believe the people that will be beneficial of this money should be the retiree that can go there and borrow the money as loan and use it to work and be returning it back to those pension managers. The government that are going there today to borrow 2 trillion naira to fund the budget of National Assembly in order to renovate National Assembly with 37 billion naira, they don't have any productive agenda. So that's why people are not comfortable with it. There's nothing wrong in borrowing. But we are in a country whereby at the end of the day, the borrower will take them to court. They will decide the court order they will obey. So I don't think we are normal as a people because things are not working. All the money they get from the custom and all that, what are they doing with it? They use it to just to buy luxurious cars, billions of cars and all the rest. And now they want to go and take the pension of the people that are suffering even to survive daily. So I think we have problems as Africans, maybe as Nigerians and as Africans, we have problems.
Adekunle, thanks for calling us. Not so your thoughts.
I mean, he has some good points. So the government borrows every year. Every year, for the last maybe 6-7 years, we've run a deficit. In fact, in the last 4 years, we've run record deficits, which means the government has borrowed a lot of money that year. And most of that money goes to just paying salaries. That's the reality. You can't see that kind of arrangement and say this is a responsible borrower because it doesn't look that way. But I think it's always easy to, put the blame on the government. Oh, government did this, government did that, government is misbehaving. But I think as Nigerians, we also have our own part to play in the whole sad story. I want to give the example of the Lekki Epe Expressway, which was supposed to be a public-private partnership with revenue from the toll gates, and that what made it make sense. But the moment they wanted to build the second toll gate, people came up in arms and said, no, we don't want to pay, we'll vote you out, blah, 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 blah. And the moment they tried to increase the toll gate, people came out and said, we don't want to pay, the vote, blah, 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 blah. And so Lagos State had to eventually, I think, buy the company over and now fund it through the taxes. Which again says that Nigerians are still kind of hostile to paying for things. I think it's part of
so the argument on that one, the agreement had to say that they provide an alternative route, which was a coastal road, which didn't come into play. So people had said, if you had maybe done that halfway, you could have met the people halfway to suggest that you were sincere in what you were doing.
So I'm not saying anybody's right or wrong, right? There are all sorts of issues around transparency too in that arrangement. No one knew exactly what's going on.
How much was being
But the
owed.
thing is that at the end, we end up in a scenario where we still push the responsibility of that road to government and close their eyes, right?
But
we didn't fight to say, okay, you must build the coastal road. Coastal road is still not built, right? We didn't fight to say, okay, it must be more transparent. It's still not transparent. We just accepted that we don't want it, and then we're still like that.
But is it
Right?
expecting government to pay for things? Doesn't that come from a place where we realize that the social contract we have with government breaks down all the time? And so that means that when government says we're going to do this, they don't do it. So government shouldn't make us pay for more things with promises that they will do more things that they end up not doing.
Well, I think it comes from for lack of a better, phrase, I get them before. I get them before mentality. We know that in the 80s, government was rich, right? In the 80s, government collected maybe 40% of GDP in all revenue. So government could do everything, basically. We got used to the idea that it's government responsibility to build roads, build ports, do electricity, do everything. Don't bother us. Maybe give us subsidy, that's all. But don't bother us. So we had the mentality of we used to be rich.
Okay.
The government used to be rich. That's no longer the case, right? Government can't afford to build all the roads he wants. We can see his budget every day. But we still have that expectation in society that, we shouldn't be bothered with these things. We shouldn't have to pay for electricity. We shouldn't have to pay for fuel. We shouldn't have to pay for roads because government has all money anyway, when in reality it's not the case.
Sorry, no. So there's something I wanted to address. I think one of the callers mentioned, I think I've even seen some tweet earlier also about the system we're doing now, the contributory system, has been the sort of shining light in the way it's been carried out. The numbers are huge, the numbers in terms of the monies we have also huge. That's why the government wants to even borrow from there in the first instance. And the argument for the people, unfortunately, who haven't been paid their pension, who used a different system, which was plagued with several failures, especially those, it was many government workers. And that system up till today is still, with several issues, still many of them still don't get paid when they should be paid and go through a horrendous biometric system and all of that. And the argument of the pension fund managers now is that they always point to that system and say that system was destined to fail. This system is safe. It's full. It can't be compromised in any way. They point to shining examples here and there. Do you think that what we're trying to do now, the government is trying to do now, compromises the contributory system in a way that people will begin to wonder what will happen to their pension 10, 20 years from now?
If they succeed, then probably. Right? And I think the caller said so. We heard stories, government owes people's pension, they haven't paid. When they pay 10%, 20%. You have to go and jump around. We have former army officers who are living on the streets because they have no pensions. That's part of the past pension system where the government or the company directly was responsible for your pension. And so we had the Reform Act in 2004, which is lauded as one of the best reforms we've done, which privatized and regulated that industry. And because of that, we've been able to build up this 10 trillion naira worth of assets. Everybody knows it's there. It gives confidence that, yes, when I retire, even if we don't catch up to inflation, at least the money is there and will be paid. It's regulated by a very good regulatory agency, PENCOM, that tries to monitor all the pension funds. There's no stories there. So we build that up, right? And we shouldn't be so eager to ruin that, right? It's one of the good reforms that we've done in Nigeria. We shouldn't be so eager to ruin that because we want to look for a shortcut to spending on electricity sector or whatever, right? We should be safeguarding that pension arrangement that we have because it's very, very important, right? It's been very successful. The only reason there is the talk of being able to borrow 2 trillion naira today is because of those reforms that allowed us to build up 10 trillion worth of assets. And let's not forget, these assets are not sitting down in a vault somewhere. They've been invested. They've been borrowed to government, invested in stock market, invested in some infrastructure, well, very little infrastructure, real estate, some companies, in fact. So it's not as if these funds are just there being dormant in a bank account, right? They are being used in the economy and used in a responsible way. So we shouldn't be so eager to roll back to the one where it's become a political achievement to say, oh, I paid people their pension. And you say, yes,
I think I should start to look at those reports being sent because I know this thing you say about them being used for different, I've seen, but never taking time to really understand that this money is actually, I think they do send reports also to people say, this is what
we did.
Every month I get a alert with my balance and a bank statement in my email saying this is where your money is, A to Z. Right?
Good.
That's very transparent, very accountable.
Now, are there things that in other countries, when a government starts to dip its hand into pension funds or starts to borrow heavily, are there mechanisms in place to police the way that government spends that money to make sure that it is used diligently? Are there things that other countries do?
Yes. So in the US, one of the big debates every year is about the debt ceiling. Oh, should we raise it? Should we not raise it? You know, you argue. If you don't agree on something, the government shuts down. Everybody goes home.
That's right.
So it's the institution of the assembly that checks the executive, right? And then if there's a dispute, then you go to the judiciary. You to have a check on the executive. And so you have these arms of government that are independent that serve as a kind of supervisor to make sure that whatever you do on the judiciary side, you must play within the rules, and on the National Assembly side, you must at least think to be responsible, right, based on what the people want, right? So those things are supposed to be the checks. Now, once you get here, well, it becomes more difficult, right? Our judicial process is still very difficult to work with. National Assembly
is our National
Assembly. Right. So those checks and balances are not there. But I mean, it's not all bad. We've had issues where the budget was debated. I think in the last 4 years there was a request to borrow 10 billion or something like that from external sources that were rejected because it couldn't be explained. So we're not completely hopeless. We have some checks.
That was a different National Assembly.
A different one.
This is a different National Assembly.
Right, it's a different one. But, in the part of institution building, we've maybe taken a few steps back, but we shouldn't be so eager to throw out the baby with the bathwater. We still have the structures in place, but we need to be more,
There's something that we've seen in the past that some Nigerian state governments do. They get into agreements with their creditors, right? Where the creditor is paid directly from the state's FAC allocation, right? Direct debit. is this an option, do you think, for pension funds? And I don't know, would that, who's going to need to make that kind of demand?
Also, for state, that remit is enforced by the federal government. So you have an independent third party who enforces the payments, right? If you want to borrow externally, for example, by the states, you have to go to the federal government and debt management office.
So who's the
They
third
have
party
to-
for the federal government?
Yeah, exactly. So it works for states because the federal government is there to enforce that you must deduct from your FAC allocation. But who is the third party for the federal government?
This is not sounding good. Let's come
Right,
back to the
that's
phone
the question.
lines. 01277 0993, 01277 1993, 01277 2993, and 01277 3993. Given all you've heard this evening, how comfortable are you with government borrowing from your pension fund? Hello, good evening.
Good evening, Sandra.
Welcome. What's your name?
Master from Ejiwo.
Go ahead.
It sounds very sorry. Please, and also, I know you are a financial expert. Please, I ask this question. What happened to our sovereign wealth fund the last administration established? What happened to that fund?
Okay.
Okay, keep listening. He'll answer that as briefly as possible.
All right. Well, the idea of the sovereign wealth fund is that you save a bit extra on your oil income. So if oil prices are 65, but you budgeted for 60, the extra $5 goes into the sovereign wealth fund. That's the idea. But
Was it practical?
recently, we have been consuming everything because we know the federal government is financially constrained. So nothing gets saved in the sovereign wealth fund. I mean, they've added a few here and there, but the sovereign fund is basically, I think it's about 2 billion now.
Yeah.
So it's still there, but it's only 2 billion, right? It's not increasing as we expect it to increase given the reality of oil prices. And that's because our budgeting system has been a bit wonky recently, right? So the sovereign wealth fund is still there, but it's not large. It's very small. The excess crude account is basically zero. Not zero, but close to it, right? So we are supposed to be saving during the good oil days, which is now, but because we are so financially constrained, we're not really saving that much.
Okay. Hello, good evening. Hello.
Hello?
Good evening to you, sir. What's your name?
Hello?
Good evening. Hello.
Good evening.
Go ahead. What's your name?
Please, this information, my name is Jordan. I'm coming from Ikorodu.
Okay.
This information this evening is very disheartening because for people like us who are going to pension, going on pension in the next 3 years, what's our hope now? Because this government cannot be trusted. I cannot trust this government because they have run every system in place. This is a government that's going to spend about 42 how many billion to repair a National Assembly. So if we at all they get this money, are we sure that this money is going to be used judiciously?
All right. Do you think this will affect people who are retiring in the next 3 years? Probably not.
I don't think so. I don't think that. I mean, it depends. If they take out 2 trillion from the pension funds, then pension funds have less liquidity, right? So, but they have enough assets to be able to pay people who are retired. 'Cause I think we'll have very few retirees coming on stream soon because in terms of generations, it's still a new fund, right? So there's still a lot more people putting into the fund.
Yeah.
Than people who are expected to retire.
Okay.
Right. So I don't think it threatens people's retirements.
In the next
In
10
the
years.
next 10 years, I don't think so.
Maybe.
But the problem is the sustainability of the fund because, these kind of reforms were supposed to build a pension fund that can last indefinitely, forever and ever and ever. Absolutely, right? And so you don't want to threaten that forever and ever and ever because once people begin to feel that this thing might not go far, then you start to see less contributions. People start to look for other options.
I mean, and
and
it shouldn't
then
be the easy option every time we have this sort of infrastructure problem. Let's
Yeah.
go to the pension fund and take money from there.
Exactly. If you do it once and it works, then what's the guarantee that next government will not come and say, hey, we need 5 trillion. We'll amend the pension act to
Well, the
allow us to
max.
40%.
Well, who knows? I mean,
who
maybe they'll
knows?
have more than 10 trillion then.
And they'll say,
then-
this generation, you have 30 years to go.
Yeah,
This generation, come and take your own now.
Exactly.
So I know you're not a politician, but is there anything that as a people we can do to make sure that we are safe? To, I don't know, if we think this is not a good idea, stop it from happening. Is there some advice you can give?
Well, I think people are not as powerless as they seem. If we talk about it, if we express enough anger, well, not anger, but enough hostility to the idea of raiding pension funds, then politicians will listen. Politicians are not heartless people. They still rely on people for votes. They still need to have some political support. So people are influential enough to make their voices heard, right, and to influence policy. And I mean, so I just want to be clear. It's not. I don't think that there's anything wrong with the federal government trying to borrow from pension funds, but I think it should be structured properly.
Okay.
Do a proper infrastructure fund. Take it to the pension fund and say, hey, we have this project structured in this way with this revenue pipeline. Invest. Pension funds do that. There's pension funds everywhere in the world do that, right? If you think of Lagos Ibadan Expressway, say, okay, we're going to put 3 tolls. We're going to make legislative changes to make sure that these tolls actually stay, and that will guarantee X amount of income. And so, invest in this. In 20 years, you make your money back. Pension funds are fine with that. Because pension funds are not here to invest for 1 year, 2 years. They are looking for ways that they can invest 20, 30 years and make a return. Right? But you have to do that hard work. And you can't just come and say, we are the government, so we're taking your money. You can't do that. Right? It's a democracy. I still believe it is a democracy.
Noso Bikili
you have to convince us that we should give you this money.
Noso Bikili is the chief economist at Business Day, and he's been helping us make sense of this move by the federal government to borrow 2 trillion naira from our pension funds. Hard facts has been great. We started with the big 3, where we told you that Lagos has banned Okadas and Keke Napep and e-hailed Okadas as well from certain areas in Lagos. We talked about that some more on Community Report, and we just concluded conversations about pensions on the Big Hard Fact. Tomorrow we're back at 3:15. Join us. At 6, the news is coming. After the news at 6:15, Conversations with Rafai will kick off, and it's always, always great. And after he's done, Game On is live at 7. I'm online as Sandra Ezekwesili, and I love to talk, so talk to me online.
And I'm Aghogho on all my social media handles. So until we see again, yalla, yalla, yalla.
Those are your hard facts, Lagos. Good night.
Yalla, yalla.
More news and information coming up. We'll be back in a moment.